Have you ever been the one everyone comes to? The one people open up to without hesitation, who listens and understands? You can feel what someone is going through before they even have the words for it. Can you relate to being that person? The one who holds space so naturally that people don't even question it. There's a way of being in the world that looks like kindness on the outside. You're the one people trust, the one who stays calm in hard moments, and the person who can sit with someone in their pain without turning away. You notice and feel things. You understand things on a level that doesn't always need to be explained. And for a long time, that gets reflected back to you as something good, something to be proud of. People will say, "You're so empathetic. You just get people. You have such a big heart." And none of that is wrong. But what doesn't always get named is how that empathy is formed. Because for some of us, it didn't come from being taught how to connect in safe, supported ways. It came from learning how to read the room early, from paying attention to tone and energy and what wasn't being said, noticing shifts before they happened, and understanding that being aware could keep things from getting worse. When that starts young, it doesn't feel like something you learned. It feels like who you are. And over time, something else can start to happen underneath that. Because when empathy is shaped in survival, it doesn't always come with boundaries. There's no clear sense of where you end and where someone else begins. So instead of just understanding what someone is feeling, you start to take it on. You absorb it, adjust around it, and respond in ways that feel almost automatic. At first, that doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like care and connection, like you're being a good person. But slowly, it can start to feel like something else. Like you're always holding something, always available. As though you're open in a way that doesn't always include you. This is Born Tired, where survival meets healing. A podcast for those of us who grew up in survival mode but are ready to heal and speak our truth. I'm Irene, a cycle breaker learning what peace feels like after years of survival. Every episode is an invitation to rest inside your truth, to feel seen, and to remember you were never alone. This is what it sounds like when silence finally breaks. Before we begin, I want to share a gentle reminder. Please listen in a way that feels safe for you. If at any point you need to pause or step away, honor that. Your well-being matters more than finishing the episode. You are not alone. Take care of yourself while you listen. I don't think I would have called it empathy at the time. It just felt like awareness. The kind of awareness that had me paying attention to everything. And it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because it felt necessary. I was the oldest, and in my family that came with an unspoken understanding. You notice things, adjust, and you don't make things harder. Being first-generation American added another layer to that. There were things that my parents were navigating for the first time. And even as a child, you feel that. You feel the pressure to be good, to not need too much, and to figure things out on your own. So I learned how to observe tone, energy, to the difference between a quiet that felt calm and a quiet that meant something was about to happen. My father's alcoholism made things unpredictable. And when things are unpredictable, you learn quickly that staying aware matters. Because awareness can keep things from escalating. So I paid attention, not just to what was happening, but to what might happen. I learned how to stay calm even when I wasn't. And my mom, her absence wasn't always physical, but it was emotional. There wasn't a place I could go to be held in what I was feeling. So I learned how to understand her, to make sense of what she couldn't give me and not to expect too much. And without realizing it, that understanding started to replace my own needs. I didn't just notice what people were feeling. I made space for it, even when there wasn't space for me. Looking back now, I can see I didn't know how to observe without absorbing. If someone felt overwhelmed, I felt it. If something was off, I carried it. If there was tension in the room, it didn't just exist around me, it lived in me. And I didn't question that. I thought that was empathy. I thought being able to feel everything so deeply, to understand people without them having to explain themselves, was part of who I was. It became a form of protection. It was learning to stay ahead of things, to manage what I could feel coming, and to adjust myself so everything around me stayed as stable as possible. Unfortunately, that didn't just stay between me and my parents. It shaped how I showed up for my sibling too. I found myself paying attention to what they needed, trying to create some kind of buffer between them and what was happening, making sure they were okay, trying to carry what they shouldn't have had to feel. No one told me to do that, but it felt understood. Because when you're aware of everything, you don't just witness it. You feel responsible for it. And over time, that responsibility starts to feel like who you are. Like being the one who understands, holds space, and can handle it. But what I didn't realize then is that empathy without boundaries doesn't just mean you care deeply. It means you lose the ability to separate what's yours and what isn't. You don't just connect, you absorb. And when you spend enough time doing that, you don't always notice when you've left yourself out of the equation because it feels normal. It feels like love and like you're being a good person. But it also looks like overriding your own needs, silencing what you feel and carrying things that were never yours to hold in the first place. And I didn't have the language for that at the time. I just knew how to be there for everyone else without realizing I had slowly stopped being there for myself. And when you move through life in that way, when your empathy was shaped in environments where awareness felt necessary, it doesn't just stay in childhood. It becomes the way you relate to everything. That role followed me into friendships too. I became the person people came to when they were falling apart. The one they called during breakups, depression, family problems, relationship problems. I always knew how to listen. I found ways to encourage and make people feel emotionally held. And for a long time, I took pride in that. It made me feel needed and valuable. My husband used to joke that people treated me like a therapist. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. But eventually, I started noticing something that hurt to admit. Some of those conversations would last hours. And by the end, the other person still never asked how I was doing. They would unload everything onto me, feel lighter after talking, and move on with their day without realizing I was carrying things too. And because I was so used to being the strong one, the listener, and the emotionally aware one, I normalized relationships where care mostly flowed in one direction. You become someone that feels deeply and who can understand people easily. You pick up on what's not being said. And on the surface, that can look like emotional intelligence, compassion, and connection. But underneath that, there can also be something else happening. Because when empathy is formed in survival, it doesn't just come from a place of openness. It comes from a place of scanning, anticipating, and trying to stay one step of what might happen next. And that kind of empathy doesn't just connect you to others, it attaches you to them. It pulls you into their emotional world in a way that makes it difficult to separate where they end and where you begin. So instead of simply understanding what someone is feeling, you start to carry it. You respond in ways that are meant to stabilize it. Over time, that becomes your default. And it's not something you chose consciously. It's because it was necessary. And when something is necessary for long enough, it starts to feel natural. Like it feels like who you are. But there's a difference between empathy that allows you to be present with someone and empathy that pulls you into responsibility for them. Between witnessing someone's experience and feeling like it's yours to manage. And when that line isn't clear, empathy can slowly turn into something that looks like care on the outside, but feels like pressure on the inside. Because you're not just feeling with someone, you're holding them. Adjusting yourself in response to them. You're prioritizing their emotional state while moving your own to the side. And the part that makes this difficult to recognize is that it often comes from a genuine place. You do care. You want to understand, to show up for people in a meaningful way. But somewhere along the way, that care became tied to how much you could take on, how much you can hold and handle without letting it show. When empathy becomes connected to that, it stops being something that nourishes connection. It starts to erode your sense of self because you're no longer just responding to others. You're organizing yourself around them. And that's where self-abandonment begins. In moments where you override what you're feeling because something else feels more urgent. When you say yes, even though something in you is asking for space. where you stay present for someone else while disconnecting from yourself. And those moments add up. They shape how you show up in relationships, what feels familiar, and what you expect from yourself. You become the one that can hold everything, the person who understands and stays even when it starts to feel heavy, even when you begin to notice the impact it's having on you. And once you notice and you want to try to show up differently, there's a part of you that resists changing it because it doesn't feel just like behavior. It feels like your identity. Like if you stop being that person, you're losing something important. Maybe even something that people value about you. And that's where it can get complicated because this isn't just about you losing your empathy. It's about redefining your relationship to it. About the understanding that the ability to feel deeply doesn't require you to carry deeply. That connection doesn't require you to merge. And being present with someone doesn't mean you have to take responsibility for what they're experiencing. That change can feel overwhelming because when you've been used to absorbing what's around you, learning to observe without absorbing can feel uncomfortable. It feels like you're pulling back and like you're not showing up in the same way. But what's actually happening is that you're creating space between what you feel and what belongs to someone else, between your response and your automatic instinct to step in. Space that allows you to stay connected without losing yourself in the process. That is important because it changes the way you experience your relationships. It allows you to care without becoming overwhelmed, to support someone without becoming responsible. And the most important thing is to be present without abandoning yourself. That's where boundaries come in, as something that protects your empathy. Because empathy on its own allows you to connect and to understand, to see people in ways that feels meaningful and real. But without boundaries, it can become something that drains you, something that keeps you in cycles of overextending, overgiving, and over-identifying with what others are going through. Empathy without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. Your empathy is a gift. Boundaries are the container that protects the gift. And when that container isn't there, empathy doesn't just flow outward. It spills over and it takes you with it. So this process is not about becoming less empathetic. It's about becoming more intentional, more aware of what you're feeling and where it's coming from. Noticing if your responses are coming from care or are they coming from conditioning. Because when empathy has been tied to survival, it usually carries a sense of urgency, a sense that you need to respond quickly to fix something, to stabilize it, to make sure that everything is okay. And learning to pause in those moments, to check in with yourself before automatically stepping in, that's part of the shift. Just being aware of when something feels aligned and when it feels like an obligation. And things didn't change for me overnight. There are still moments where I feel the pull to absorb. I find myself stepping into old patterns before I even realize it. But that doesn't mean I haven't grown. It means I'm still learning. I'm becoming aware in real time. And over time, that awareness has created choice to stay connected to myself while being connected to others. To step back when something isn't mine to carry and to allow someone else to have their own experience without taking it on as my responsibility. These changes haven't made me less caring. It's made my care more sustainable. It's made my empathy something that supports connection instead of something that comes at my expense. Because I'm no longer giving from a place of depletion. I'm giving from a place of presence. And there's a huge difference. One leaves you feeling drained and the other leaves you feeling grounded. And I think that's what this process really comes down to. Learning how to stay open without losing yourself. How to feel deeply without carrying everything. To be with people without becoming responsible for them. And trusting that your empathy doesn't lose its value when it's supported by boundaries. If anything, that's when it becomes something that can actually last. And something that I want to acknowledge before we close is that when you're someone who leads with empathy, it often shapes the kind of people you attract. Because the way you show up, listen, understand, and hold space, it gets felt. And people respond to that. Some people are drawn to it in a healthy, mutual way, where there's respect, awareness, and care on both sides. But there are also times where that same empathy attracts people who are used to being held without having to hold themselves. People who are comfortable receiving, but not necessarily aware of what it takes from you to give that way. And at first, it doesn't feel obvious. It can feel like connection and closeness. You might even feel understood in a way that feels very familiar. When you spend a lifetime being the one who understands others, it can feel natural to step into that again. In the beginning, it doesn't always register as something that's one-sided. It just feels like you're being who you are. But over time, you might start noticing things that stand out. Moments where you leave an interaction and you feel drained instead of grounded. Where you realize you've been holding space for someone else without that same space being available for you. You notice your empathy starts to feel less like connection and more like responsibility. And those moments can be confusing because it's not always clear where the line was crossed. There's no single point where it suddenly becomes too much. It happens gradually, in the ways you continue to show up, even when something in you is asking for a pause. How you give the benefit of the doubt, even when patterns start to repeat. Or the ways you stay present for someone else while slowly moving away from yourself. And recognizing that doesn't mean you were wrong for caring. It means your empathy was real, but it also means that without boundaries, that empathy didn't have anything to protect it. So instead of being something that could exist within balance, it became something that others could lean on without necessarily realizing the impact it was having on you. And that realization can bring up a lot, because it's not just about the other person. It's also about understanding how familiar that dynamic might feel, the way it mirrors how you learned to connect early on. So if you're noticing that pattern now, if you're starting to see where your empathy has been met with imbalance, you don't have to go back and analyze every interaction. This isn't about reacting. It's about becoming aware of how you feel in your connections, of what feels mutual and what feels one-sided. To notice when your empathy feels grounded and when it feels like you're losing yourself in it. Because that awareness alone starts to change things. It gives you a moment to pause where you could check in with yourself before automatically stepping back into that role. And in that pause, you start to create space to choose how you want to show up, to decide what feels aligned and what doesn't. It gives you an opportunity to recognize that being empathetic doesn't mean being endlessly available or being responsible for how others process their emotions. You don't have to stay in dynamics that leave you feeling depleted. And learning that doesn't make you less kind. It doesn't take away from your ability to connect. If anything, it allows your empathy to exist in a way that feels more honest, balanced, and sustainable. Because you're no longer giving from a place where you feel like you have to. You're giving from a place where you choose to. And that choice changes the way relationships feel and the way you experience yourself within those relationships. It allows something that isn't built on carrying more than your share. That doesn't require you to disappear in order to maintain connection. So if this is something you're starting to notice, if you're seeing where your empathy has been stretched beyond what feels right, you don't have to have all the answers today or to know exactly what to do next. You can start with awareness and noticing, allowing yourself to feel what comes up without immediately trying to adjust it. Because for a long time, you may have been focused on understanding everyone else. And this is where that begins to change. This is where you start including yourself in that understanding, where your needs, your capacity, and your emotional space are part of the equation. And that might feel like you're doing something different, but different doesn't mean wrong. It means you're creating something new that allows you to stay connected without losing yourself in the process. It's about staying present with yourself as things begin to change and letting that be enough. If this episode resonated with you, please share with someone who might need it. And take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen. Your review helps more people find the podcast and reminds others they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show so you never miss an episode. You can also join me on Substack, where I share weekly reflections and gentle reminders to help you feel less alone on your healing journey. You'll find the link in the show notes. If you'd like to connect beyond the podcast, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Born Tired Podcast. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, there's a link there to buy me a coffee. Thank you for being here. for listening with an open heart. Most of all, remember this: your story matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone. This episode was written and narrated by Irene Torres. Audio production by Carlos Torres. Original music composed by Carlos Torres.